The ache of emptiness isn't just sadness. There's a silence inside you that no noise can reach, a slow, aching pull, not sharp like grief, but wide, like a canyon carved through years of absence. We call it loneliness, but it's more than just the lack of company. It's the sense that something is missing, not out there, but in here. It shows up quietly, in the middle of a crowded room, in the pause between messages that never arrive, in the deep hours of the night when the world is sleeping, and you are not. And you wonder, is it just sadness? Is it depression? Is it neediness? Or is it something else entirely? Carl Jung believed it was. He saw loneliness not as a flaw, but as a signal. A quiet, persistent knock from the unconscious. Not to shame you, but to wake you. This ache, this emptiness, is the soul's way of saying you've wandered too far from yourself. You've lived too long trying to be what others expect. You've worn too many masks. You've forgotten the sound of your own inner voice. And so the psyche mourns. It mourns the lost dialogue between who you are and who you pretend to be. It mourns the forgotten rituals, the unlived dreams, the neglected inner world. That emptiness? It's the echo of your own self calling you home. Jung taught that beneath every emotional pattern lies an archetypal energy, a force, a voice, an intelligence of the deep psyche. Loneliness, then, isn't just a feeling. It's a messenger, an invitation to descend, not into despair, but into depth. You are not meant to escape loneliness. You are meant to listen to it, to ask gently, what have I abandoned within myself? Whose voice have I silenced? What part of me is asking to be seen? Because beneath the ache is not just pain, but truth. Truth about what you long for. Truth about who you really are. Truth about how disconnected you've become from your inner life. And once you begin to listen, once you create space for solitude rather than fear it, you begin to change. You begin to reclaim pieces of yourself scattered across the years. You begin to recognize that what you called emptiness was actually a clearing, a sacred space ready to be filled with something real. You begin to feel the presence of your own soul again, not as an idea, but as a living, breathing companion. So no, this ache isn't just sadness, it's a sacred invitation, a whisper from the depths. Come back to yourself, I've missed you. Jung's hidden truth, loneliness is a call from the self-loneliness. We're told it means we need more people, more plans, more distractions, more movement. But what if Jung was right? What if loneliness isn't a social crisis, but a spiritual one? Carl Jung spoke of something far deeper than the ego, deeper than the voice that says, I am this, I am that. He called it the self, not the surface personality, but the vast organizing center of the psyche. The self is the totality of who you are, your conscious mind, your unconscious depths, your past wounds, your unrealized potential, your light and your shadow. And when you become cut off from this self, you don't just feel off. You feel hollow. You feel adrift, like a boat with no compass, no anchor. You may be surrounded by people and still feel empty. You may smile, work, laugh, and still feel like something inside you is dying. This is not weakness. This is the signal. The self has fallen into silence. And loneliness, that ache you cannot name, is the soul's cry to return. Jung believed the self is always trying to make itself known, through dreams, synchronicities, symptoms, or deep yearnings. And sometimes, when we've strayed too far into the noise of the world, it withdraws, not to punish you, but to create a void, a sacred pause, a moment of spiritual hunger so profound that no distraction can satisfy it. That's when you feel it, that aching loneliness, that sense that you're not where you're meant to be, even if everything looks fine from the outside. But here's the truth Jung left us with. You are not being abandoned. You are being summoned. The loneliness is not asking you to scroll, run, date, or numb. It is asking you to descend, to leave the surface of identity and fall back into the arms of your original self. It's asking you to turn inward, to listen to your dreams, to revisit the forgotten parts of your soul, to stop performing and start remembering. Who were you before the world told you who to be? What secret desires live at the edges of your awareness? What are you afraid to admit you've lost? These are not questions of ego. They are the self reaching through the fog saying, "Come back, you've been gone too long." This is Jung's hidden truth. Loneliness is not a problem to fix, it is a threshold to cross. And when you listen to it, when you sit in its stillness and ask what it wants to show you, you will find not an absence, but a presence. The presence of something ancient, sacred, and whole. The self calling you back into alignment, calling you home. Shadow work, the rejected parts that keep you isolated. There is a loneliness deeper than silence. It's not caused by who left or who never arrived, but by who you've exiled within. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the forgotten self, the unwanted parts, the emotions that were too messy, too loud, too tender, too unacceptable for the world you were taught to survive in. The shadow isn't evil, it's not your enemy. It's everything you were forced to hide in order to be accepted. And so you buried your rage, you hid your longing, you softened your truth. You made yourself smaller to be loved, quieter to be safe, nicer to be tolerated. But here's the wound. Every piece of you that was rejected by the outside world became an orphan on the inside. Loneliness often has less to do with other people and more to do with the fact that you're not speaking to yourself. You're ignoring the voice in you that's tired. You're shaming the part that's still grieving. You're silencing the wildness that once danced in your blood. You're surrounded by ghosts of the self you once were, and loneliness is their funeral song. Jung taught that to become whole, you must descend into the shadow, not to be consumed by it, but to reclaim what was lost. That fear you suppress. It's trying to protect your wounded child, that anger you swallow. It's trying to defend your boundaries, that sorrow you keep distracting yourself from. It's asking to be honored, to be held. The more you exile these parts, the more fragmented you feel. You start to believe you're broken. But you're not broken. You're divided, scattered across years of emotional survival. And that's where the loneliness lives. In the space between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. Shadow work isn't just psychological, it's spiritual alchemy. It's the sacred act of turning toward your rejected self and saying, "You belong here, even your mess. Even your darkness, even your unfinished stories." It's hard work. It asks for courage, not comfort. Honesty, not perfection. Compassion, not performance. But every time you sit with what you once ran from, you become less alone. Because wholeness isn't about being flawless. It's about being fully you. Light and shadow, pain and power, grace and grief. And here is the paradox Jung understood so well. When you stop abandoning yourself, you stop feeling so abandoned by life. You begin to trust your own presence. You no longer fear your emotions. You listen to them. You begin to realize that the intimacy you were searching for was not in someone else's eyes, but in your ability to meet your own truth. This is shadow work, and it is how the isolated self begins to feel whole again. The persona trap. Why pretending makes you feel alone. We've all worn it. The smile that hides the ache, the confidence that masks the doubt, the agreeable tone that swallows the truth. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to face the world. A necessary mask at first. We learn to shape it early, as children trying to survive in systems that rarely welcome the whole truth of who we are. The persona helps us adapt. It lets us function in jobs, in families, in crowds. It's the social skin we slip into to feel safe, to be accepted, to belong. But here's the paradox. The more we rely on the mask, the more alone we become behind it. Because the persona isn't you. It's a version of you, curated, filtered, polished. It's who you think others want, not who your soul is. You tell yourself you're okay. You perform normal. You say yes when your heart whispers no. You laugh at the joke that cuts too close. You go along just to get along. And slowly, the real you retreats, not because you're weak, but because you've learned it might not be safe to show up unmasked. Jung warned that when we become too identified with the persona, we begin to mistake the performance for the person. We forget that the mask was meant to serve us, not replace us. And so, a deep loneliness begins to bloom. You feel unseen, even when eyes are on you. You feel unknown, even in the middle of a relationship. You feel exhausted, not because you're doing too much, but because you're being too little of yourself. Loneliness, then, isn't always about isolation from others. Sometimes it's the isolation from your own soul. The ache of not being able to say what you really mean, feel what you truly feel, or be who you actually are. It's not your fault. You were taught to survive, not to be authentic. But the pain of the persona is the soul's quiet rebellion. It's the whisper that says, I want to be real again. I want to be raw again. I want to belong. Not because I fit in, but because I show up as myself. The journey out of the persona trap isn't reckless vulnerability. It's reconnection. It's beginning moment by moment. It's saying no when your body tightens. It's resting when your mask says, keep going. It's speaking what matters, even if your voice shakes. Jung's insight was clear. You cannot be intimate with others until you are intimate with your own truth. And the more of your truth you reclaim, the less lonely you become. Because the soul doesn't want applause, it wants integrity. And in that integrity, you find a strange and sacred thing. Yourself. Unmasked, unhidden. Finally home. Modern life whispers a lie over and over again. If you're lonely, you must fix it. Swipe more. Work harder. Stay busy. Buy something. Be seen. Keep scrolling. We are taught that loneliness is a glitch in the system, a problem to solve, an error to erase. But Carl Jung offered a deeper truth. Loneliness is not a flaw. It is a summons to stop running from yourself, a sacred ache meant to pull you inward. But we don't want inward. We want instant. We want soothing, not soul-searching. And so we cover our emptiness with dopamine. We numb it with noise. We fix it with another person's attention, as if someone else's presence could replace our absence from ourselves. This is the myth that loneliness goes away when something new enters our life. A lover, a job, a project, a goal. But Jung warned, when we bypass the message of loneliness, it doesn't dissolve, it deepens. Because the soul doesn't want a distraction, it wants a dialogue. It doesn't want to be rescued, it wants to be recognized. Loneliness is not asking you to fill it, it's asking you to feel it. To sit with it like an old friend you once abandoned. To ask, what are you here to show me? What part of myself have I turned away from? What longing lives beneath this silence? You see, when you stop trying to fix loneliness like it's a mistake, you begin to understand its meaning. It's not just sadness, it's separation from the self, and no amount of outer connection can bridge that gap until you turn and face the inner one. This is not about guilt. It's about invitation, because underneath the ache is a doorway, and through that doorway is your authenticity, your inner voice, your real needs, not the ones shaped by fear or culture or craving. Loneliness, then, becomes a compass, not toward others, but toward your own soul, and that's where Jung's genius lives, in his refusal to pathologize the pain. He didn't say get over it, he said go through it, with reverence, with curiosity. With the humility to know that some wounds don't want quick fixes, they want truth. So what if loneliness isn't something to run from, but something to listen to? What if it's not asking for noise, but for naming? Not a partner, but presence. Not productivity, but pause. Healing begins there, not in the chase, but in the stillness. Not in fixing the pain, but in finally feeling it. And in that sacred space of feeling, you begin to remember what the world made you forget. You were never meant to outrun your emptiness. You were meant to meet it. And through that meeting, become whole. Dreams, symbols, and the language of the soul. When you're lonely, truly lonely, something stirs beneath the surface. In the silence of solitude, when the world quiets and no one is watching, your dreams begin to speak louder. Not in words, but in symbols, in strange places, in forgotten faces, in animals, oceans, staircases, old houses, all painted in the surreal language of the unconscious. Carl Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious, but he also called them letters from the self, sent in metaphors, delivered in sleep. And often it is loneliness that breaks open the door, because when you're no longer distracted by outer noise, the inner world begins to reveal itself. And suddenly, what felt like emptiness starts to feel like initiation. You dream of fire. Perhaps your repressed passion is calling. You dream of a cave. Maybe your soul is asking for retreat, reflection, return. You dream of an unfamiliar woman or man, an archetype of your inner anima or animus knocking on the gates of your heart, asking to be known. Loneliness clears the space for these encounters. It makes you available to the unseen, to the ancient, to the sacred language of symbolic truth. But here's the danger: most people ignore their dreams. They shrug them off, call them weird, or useless, or just stress. But Jung knew your unconscious is trying to help you, not haunt you. And the stranger the dream, the deeper the message. You see, the soul doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in myth, in image, in mystery. It wraps wisdom in riddles, not to confuse you, but to initiate you. Because some truths are too deep for language. They must be felt. They must be symbolized. In times of loneliness, your dreams become more vivid, not by accident, but by necessity. The self is trying to get your attention, not to fix your loneliness, but to transform it. And that transformation often begins with a symbol: a lion, a forest, a storm, a key. These aren't random. They're sacred. They are the alphabet of your soul. If you ignore them, the ache deepens. If you listen, really listen, they begin to point the way forward. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Loneliness is that moment when dreaming turns to awakening. Not the kind of awakening you post about. The kind that shatters you, softens you, changes how you see yourself forever. So when the ache of solitude wraps around you, ask not, "How do I escape this?" Ask, "What is the self trying to tell me? What new birth is this silence preparing me for? What dream is waiting to be remembered?" Because the truth is this: you are not broken. You are being broken open, and sometimes your dreams are the first light to enter through the cracks. Loneliness as the beginning of individuation. There are seasons of life that arrive like winter, cold, still, and strangely silent. Everything familiar begins to wither. The outer world feels distant. The people you once clung to now seem like shadows, and within you something aches, but you can't name it. Carl Jung knew this terrain well. He called it not a crisis, but a beginning, not a failure, but a threshold. This is where the process of individuation begins. Individuation is the soul's deep longing to become whole, to unify the fragments within you, to integrate shadow and light, feminine and masculine, conscious and unconscious. It is not a path of comfort, it is a path of truth. And often it begins in isolation. Jung believed that loneliness is not a punishment, but a sacred initiation. It is the phase where the ego breaks down, not to destroy you, but to make space for something deeper to rise. The self. The self is not who you pretend to be, not your roles, your resume, your reflection. It is your essence, eternal, whole, hidden beneath all you were taught to be. But to find the self, you must first lose everything that is not it. And so loneliness becomes the fire. It burns away false attachments. It strips the masks. It silences the noise. It is in this great undoing that the real work begins. You start asking different questions. You stop performing. You face your shadow. You feel your wounds, not to wallow, but to reclaim them. You start to listen to your dreams. You speak less, but say more. You seek less validation and more truth. This is individuation, the journey inward, the path home. But make no mistake, it is not a quick fix. It is not glamorous. It is a soul-forging pilgrimage that happens quietly, often in the hidden corners of life where no one is clapping. Jung warned that those who skip this journey, who cling to shallow connections or numb the ache with distractions, may live outwardly successful lives, but they will always feel like something is missing, because what's missing is themselves. Loneliness is the crack in the ego's shell. Individuation is what emerges from that crack. Not a better version of who you were, but a truer version of who you've always been. So if you feel lost, if the silence is deafening, if the world feels distant and the mirror unrecognizable, take heart. You are not dissolving, you are becoming. You are not abandoned, You are being called. This ache is not the end. It is the sacred beginning of your individuation, the slow, luminous journey toward your original integrated self. Why you're not broken, just in transition. There will come a time when you feel like everything inside you is falling apart. Your thoughts scattered, your identity dissolving, your emotions raw and unfamiliar. In these moments, you may whisper to yourself, "Something must be wrong with me." But what if nothing is wrong? What if this unraveling is not a breakdown, but a breakthrough? Not damage, but transformation. Carl Jung understood this inner storm better than most. In the depths of his own crisis, a period that nearly unraveled his sanity, he encountered something profound. He wrote the Red Book during this descent, a vivid, terrifying, mystical journey into the soul. A book never meant to impress, but to heal. Jung didn't see himself as broken. He saw himself as a man in transition. He said, "I had to let myself plummet into the depths." What I found there was not destruction, but renewal. You too may be standing at that edge, where nothing feels clear anymore, where relationships no longer nourish, where dreams seem distant and your inner compass spins wildly. But you are not defective, you are disintegrating. So something deeper can integrate. You are not meant to stay who you were. The ache you feel, the confusion, the spiritual fatigue, the overwhelming sensitivity, these are not signs of weakness, they are signs of awakening. The soul doesn't evolve through constant clarity and control. It evolves through the sacred mess, through the thresholds where identity crumbles and the ego no longer has all the answers. You are between versions of yourself. You are in the womb of becoming. And like any birth, it feels dark, tight, uncertain. But this is how rebirth works. Jung would say that the part of you that feels broken is actually the part still clinging to the old life, to the false self, the persona, the illusions of control. And the part of you that feels lost is the part about to be found. When we enter this sacred transition, when we stop performing, stop pretending, stop bypassing the pain, we begin to descend into our true self. We meet the archetypes, we face the shadow, we hear the animus or anima whispering. We learn to embrace the trickster's chaos, and slowly, what once felt like madness becomes initiation. You are not alone. You are walking the path that mystics, seekers, and sages have walked for centuries. And though it may feel empty, this path is rich with meaning. You are not broken. You are being remade, not polished, but purified. Not perfected, but realigned. So when the night is long, when no one understands, when it feels like you're falling apart, trust this: you are not ending, you are beginning, again. You are in sacred transition. And from this space, your real life, your soul's life, finally begins. Reconnecting with your inner child, the hidden voice. Within the silence, loneliness is not always an absence. Sometimes it is a presence waiting to be heard. A whisper from deep within, soft and shy, like the voice of a child you once were. That ache in your chest. That strange heaviness that surfaces when the world goes quiet. It might not be sadness. It might be the echo of a younger you, reaching out with open hands, asking, "Do you remember me?" Carl Jung believed that within each of us lives the inner child, not a metaphor, but a living psychic presence. A bundle of memories, wounds, joys, and truths buried under years of pretending, performing, and protecting. And when we feel most alone, that child often stirs. Many of us grew up silencing our innocence, taught that vulnerability was weakness, that playfulness was immature, that our needs were too much. So we grew hard, distant, disconnected, from wonder, from softness, from self. But the inner child doesn't die. She hides. He waits. And often it's through the ache of loneliness that this hidden self begins to rise. You may feel empty because you've been living without your emotional core. The part of you that once believed in magic, that once cried without shame, that once trusted life before it hurt. Loneliness isn't just the absence of others, it's the absence of the you that was once whole before the world said, "Not enough." Jung said, in every adult there lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is becoming, is never completed, and calls for unceasing care. To reconnect with your inner child is not regression, it is remembrance. It's choosing to feel again, to soften again, to honor your early wounds without judgment. It's sitting with yourself, hand on heart, and whispering, "You're safe now, I see you. I won't abandon you again." You can begin slowly. Write a letter to your younger self. Draw, dance, cry, be still. Reclaim the playfulness you thought was lost, the tenderness you labeled as weakness. And notice how that emptiness starts to shift. Not vanish, but become meaningful. Because now your loneliness isn't hollow, it's holy. It's the call to reunite with your truest self, the self that still dreams, still hopes, still believes in love. And when you welcome that child home, you'll find that what you were really searching for wasn't someone else. It was you. Turning loneliness into wholeness. The soul's secret invitation. What if loneliness wasn't your enemy? What if it wasn't a flaw to fix, but a doorway to something deeper? A secret invitation from the soul asking you to come home. Carl Jung didn't see painful emotions as problems. He saw them as messages, symbols encoded in silence. And loneliness. He believed it was the soul's cry for integration. We try so hard to run from it. We swipe, scroll, drink, date, binge, numb, all in the name of fixing the ache. But loneliness isn't a wound to patch up. It's a mirror, showing you where you've lost connection with yourself. And paradoxically, when you stop fighting it, when you sit with it, breathe into it, and simply listen, something begins to shift. The silence starts to speak. It tells you where you've abandoned your truth, where you've worn a persona that no longer fits, where your inner child still waits, where your dreams have dimmed. And it also tells you you are not broken. You are being invited to deepen, to slow down, to reroute in what is real. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole, not by rejecting parts of yourself, but by bringing them home.